Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good after midnight, whatever time you're watching this video. Welcome to another episode of Greg Blends. In today's episode, I'm going to show you how to make a mosaic out of Lego bricks. And at first you might think that this is a difficult thing because you have to manually assign colors and kind of have a little bit of artistic vision, but in fact it is extremely simple. Now, this is an old render I made, I think 2 years ago, and I wanted to see how fast I could make it. And so this was from zero, from absolutely nothing, to this completed render you see. It took me 6 minutes. So obviously, if you know what you're doing, you can make these extremely quickly. Now, I'm going to go a little bit slower today so that I can explain how everything works, but it'll be a shorter video. Definitely won't be a multi-part series. So let's get started. I'm going to go over to Blender. I'm going to split my view, get an image editor, and then I'm going to open up some reference material I found ahead of time. Now, this shows the dimensions of a Lego brick, and we'll just go ahead and start making that. So, as you can see, my Blender's default scene does not have a cube, so let's go and add a cube. And to make things easier, what I want to do is put the origin of the cube, which is right now at the center, in this corner. So I'm going to select this vertice, and oh, you know what? Let me turn on screencast keys so you guys can see perfect what I'm pushing. I'm going to go here, I'm going to hit Shift S and say cursor to selected, and now the 3D cursor is right on that corner. Exit the edit mode, right click, set origin to 3D cursor. Alright, and then now with this cube selected, we'll go to the item and hit 0, and now it's right there at the center of the world. So perfect. Now we want to go into edit mode, make sure we're in vertex mode by pressing 1 or selecting vertices. And we want to turn on X-ray mode because right now if I were to go to top view and select, we'd only get the top 2 vertices. But by turning on X-ray mode, we can see through the mesh, and when I go to top and I select, we get that whole side. Now, this is in metric, so I want to go to my, what is this called, Scene Properties tab, go to Units, and make sure that we're in metric. And what's cool is, okay, so this is the X-axis. So if we go to X, and we see that we want it to be 7.8 millimeters wide, we can just go to X and say 7.8 and then mm for millimeters. And then obviously it gets super narrow because previously it was 2 meters. We'll do the same thing for the top. We'll go here, but this time this is on the y-axis. So we'll say 7.8 millimeters. All right, and then we have the super narrow thing. We'll go to the front view, deselect everything, select just that. And this is actually 9.6 millimeters tall. So 9.6 millimeters. There we go. And if we focus in, we have our perfectly proportioned Lego. Now we can center it again. Instead of having this corner be in the center of the screen, we want to center the brick. And one way we can do this is to select everything. And right now you can see it's 0.39 on X and 0.39 on Y, and that's because it's averaging the positions of these vertices. This vertice is at 0, this one's at 7.8 or 0.0078. And if you were to average 0 with this, you would get that, which is just half. So what we can actually do is select everything, and if we put these to 0, it'll automatically move it to the center, maintaining the offsets. So now the average is 0. It's kind of confusing, but if you don't fully understand, don't worry, just copy what I did and you should be good. All right, so with that there, we now want to go to top view. Put our 3D cursor in the center with Shift C, and we want to add a circle for this. Now it says the width of this circle is 4.8 millimeters, so let's go ahead and add a circle. And in this little menu that pops up, we can expand that, and you can see our circle is way too big, but we can change its radius. Now remember, a radius is only half the width of a circle. The diameter is the full width, but it lets us change the radius. So if the diameter is 4.8, we want to do 2.4 millimeters. All right, zoom in, and we have a perfectly centered circle right where we need it. Now, I'm going to go to this vertex. Any of the vertexes on the top will do. Shift S, cursor to selected. So our cursor's there. I'm going to hold Alt to select all of the vertices of the circle. And I'm going to go to the period key and choose 3D cursor. So we will be scaling around the 3D cursor. Finally, I'm going to hit scale. I'm going to constrain it to the Z axis and push 0, which will snap those vertices right to the top. Now there's other ways you can do snapping in Blender. I do it with the scaling method because that's what I'm used to, so that's what I'm showing you. And now we want to make it go up 1.7 millimeters. So let's go to front view. We will extrude, right click to let go of it. Then we'll hit grab Z and type in 0.0017. And that should be the height of a Lego brick stud. Then we'll just do an extrude, scale in. Oops, we have to put our scaling mode back to median point. Scale in once more, hit F to fill. Now normally I don't like using n-gons, but in this very simple case it's okay. We're not doing anything super heavy, like processing wise. We're not going to be doing any deforming, so an n-gon is okay here, but in general I would say stay away from n-gons. Alright, we can turn off X-ray mode now, and our brick is almost done. Let's shade smooth so that we smooth that out. And obviously it tries to smooth these hard corners, which we don't want. So we will go into our vertice mode, normals, turn on auto smooth. And so this keeps this side nice and smooth, but keeps everything else square. I'm going to go into edit mode, go into face mode, select this face, delete faces, because we don't need that face for our render. We're only going to be rendering the top side. The final touch I want to do is go into edge mode, select all of these edges, as well as this ring here. Press Ctrl B for bevel. And then as you can see, it does a beveled edge. And something like this is probably pretty good. And then I'm going to use the scroll wheel and do 2 ticks and then click to apply. So now we have rounded edges on the brick, but everything else still looks flat. So I am pretty happy with that Lego brick, and we're only 7 minutes in. Alright, so I have a Lego brick that I'm pretty happy with. The next step we want to do is get the material started and get the Lego letters on top, because we're going to duplicate this brick hundreds of times, and we want to have the material and the Lego logos set up before the duplication. So let's go ahead and rename this brick, and we will go and create a new material called brick. And then I'm going to bring up a shader editor, and we will make this, for now we'll just make this a yellow brick like the picture. Actually, I think I can just sample that. Let's turn on rendering, and I want to use, for now, I want to use cycles, I feel like. And let's also set up an environment texture. So in the World tab for background, I'm going to choose environment texture. And then I have a folder where there's a bunch of HDRI environment textures. So I like this one. I'm just going to open that one. Let's make it a little bit brighter. And I'm happy with that for rendering now. And right now I think we're seeing some artifacts, and that's probably because the Lego brick is so small. Because we worked on millimeters. So what I'm going to do is just scale this up by 10. And that got rid of those artifacts. And one thing is, with rendering, if you have an object that's too big or too small, it will sometimes introduce rendering artifacts. And that's because computers can only do math to a certain level of precision. And things that are really small or really big, you lose precision. So sometimes, typically you want to keep things to a real world scale, because light behaves in certain ways, and if something is rendered like way too big, you can tell from the shadows, from the lens distortion, and from other things that the render's kind of off. But for now, we're going to work at a larger size, because for this, I think it's fine. But a lot of times you want to stick to a real world scale, but in this case, it is such a small model, on the order of millimeters, that I think it just makes sense to Make it a little bit bigger to avoid those artifacts. All right, so now what we want to do is get that Lego logo on there. And the way that we're going to do that is with a bump map. So I searched for Lego logo. Let's view this image, copy this, go into Photoshop, paste it. Now we want to make the canvas a square. Okay, let's make everything like 350. All right, I'm going to copy everything. Actually, I'm going to make the Lego logo a little bit smaller. I don't want it to be super big. I'm going to do a Control-Shift-C to copy merged, paste, and then Control-I to invert. And then the idea is where it's black, nothing will happen, and where it's light, closer to a value of 1, it will be bumped up, raised above the surface. So I've already saved this file, so I'm just going to go ahead and create a new texture, image texture. We're going to open it up, go into textures, Lego, and this we're going to move down. And this is very important. In this model, we're going to use 2 UV maps. Now, if you're familiar with UV unwrapping, you've probably just used 1 UV map before, but Blender actually allows you to have many UV maps. So this one we're going to name UV bump. And we're going to take a input of type UV map. We're going to choose bump and put that into the vector slot. Now, this is being used as a bump map, so the color space should be non-color, because we don't want it to have any of the gamma correction, applied to the image file. This just should be black and white values only. Then we're going to go into vector. We're going to choose bump, take the color, put this into height, and then we're going to put normal into our normal here. And as you can see, it's starting to do something, but it looks a little bit weird. So we have to do our UVs. Luckily, this is super easy. We're going to take our Lego image. We're going to press 1 on the keyboard here. Tab to go into edit mode. A to select all. And then press U for unwrap and choose project from view, bounds. All right, and this we're going to actually switch to the UV editor. And that already looks pretty good. As you can see, we already start to have the Lego logo. It's just a little bit too big. So I'm going to select in the UV editor, just the circle part, scale that up to about there. And if we go back to the image editor and we look at our reference, so that corner comes pretty close to the edge, so I think that looks pretty good. Now, obviously, it's not going to be adding height in real life, and we can change the strength on this to be a little bit less aggressive. Play with these values a little bit. And I think that looks good. Now, Lego bricks are pretty shiny in real life, so we want to turn the roughness down. And I like how that looks for our Lego brick. So we're almost done, believe it or not. We have a Lego brick with a bump map texture. Now all we have to do is duplicate this a bajillion times and color the individual Lego bricks. But that's actually surprisingly easy. Oh, actually, before we do this step, I think I just noticed a mistake there. There is a little bit of Lego still showing on the main surface of the brick. So let's go fix that. Go back to UV editor, and what I'm going to do is just take just the Lego brick, select everything, and make it smaller, and just put it in a corner there. And that fixed that. And this actually looks like it needs to be inverted. I think, yeah, that looks better. Okay. All right, so let's go back to what we were doing. Go to top view. I'm going to go into wireframe, and I'm going to go to modifiers, add an array modifier. And we want to do, right now the relative offset is 1, but we want to bump it up just a little bit so that there's gaps between the bricks. And let's see how that looks. That gap is probably a little bit too much. Let's try half that. Probably half that as well. Whoops. Okay, I like that. So there's a gap between the bricks. They're not completely touching, but they are very close. Maybe even closer. Let's half it again. because you really, yeah, I think that looks good. Okay, so count. Let's do 100. So that's what it would look like resolution-wise, 100. That's probably a bit much. Let's do 50. All right, there's 50 Legos across. And then we're going to collapse that and do another array modifier. But this time, instead of this axis, we'll put 0. And here, we will do, what was this one? It was, I'll just copy the value. How about that? We'll put that there. And we'll do 70. All right, so now we have a bunch of Legos. And I wanted to do American Gothic. And that's roughly the aspect ratio of this. Maybe a little bit less. Let's try 65. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. Now, it's not going to be perfect. You could take your time with this. I'm not going to. I'm just going to try to get this done as quickly as possible. But we have all our Legos now. Now, before we go to actually putting the texture onto this, I want to take a moment to talk about how coloring stuff works. All right, so I have a new blender here, and I want to explain how you can leverage a UV map in a creative way to color something. So I'm going to create a Suzanne monkey head here. Whoops. Of course, I have to shade smooth, and because I hate low poly, I'm going to put a subdivision surface modifier on there. Okay, so we have our Suzanne, and I'm going to create a material. And we will go into the shader editor. We'll also get a UV editor, and I have prepared a rainbow. And we are going to get an image texture, which is also that rainbow, and put that into the base color. We will go into material preview. And right now it's all over the place. And we're going to go to our UV map, and we'll call this UV map, I don't know, rainbow. And I'm going to go into front view, edit view, select all, and say unwrap project from view. Then in the UV editor, I'm going to expand this. And you can see that the rainbow goes horizontally from ear to ear and is basically copying what the image is doing. But let's create a new UV map. So we'll call this UV map color. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into input UV map. And if we choose rainbow, all right, we get this image. But I'm going to go to color real quick, and it looks the same for now, but I'm going to basically just shrink the head down until it is the size of one of these stripes. So now you can see it is blue, and if we move it over, it turns dark blue, then it turns green, then it turns green again, then it turns yellow, and etc. And the reason why I have two UV maps here is if we want to go back to the original, we can just switch this to rainbow, and we have that. So if we go into edit mode and we look at the rainbow, it's from ear to ear, and we see this. But if we go into edit mode and we choose the color, you can see it's just the size of a single stripe. And when we switch this to color, it just gets all its color information from that one stripe. Well, we can take this further. That shouldn't be too shocking on its own, but what happens if we scale this until it's just a single point? Well, it still works. As soon as we cross boundaries into a different color, the entire monkey will update. Now, before, if we were to do this like that, you'd see there's a little bit of yellow creeping up, and it's mostly orange. Here it is, green and yellow. Here it is blue with a little bit of green. But if we scale it to 0, it's a single point, which means it can only be over a single color at a time. So now when we cross that boundary, it just instantly changes. And so we're going to use this to color our Legos. So let's go back to our Lego scene. Now what we want to do is apply both of these modifiers. All right, and now we have a ton of Legos. And we're going to go in, and actually with it still in object mode, we're going to go to our vertex groups, and we're going to say we'll call this UV color. All right, and now what we're going to do is we're going to select everything. We're going to say unwrap project from view bounds. And so now everything has become a grid on the texture. And we have to make sure that the color UV map is selected, because if we go to bump, it will look like this, but with color, it will look like this. And then we want to go to our scaling modes and say individual origins and scale to 0. And what that has done is made a bunch of single points over this texture. So now we can go and get a texture image. We can pick from our American Gothic graphic, plug that into color, but we're going to get a UV map node, and by default, what you'd see is that every single brick has the entire image on it, which is obviously not what we want. But if we switch to UV color, every brick gets its own color from the image. And there we go. So this, this tutorial was a little bit longer than 6 minutes, but you could see how easy it was with that simple trick. So because each brick, let's just select one. See if we can't select that. All right, so that is just a single point right here. And so if we were to move it somewhere, if Blender's not going to lag too hard. I don't know why Blender's lagging super hard today. Let's try to put it over to this pink area. You could see that the brick over here turned pink. And so what we did is we did a separate unwrap where we shrunk all of the colors to a single point, and then that samples colors from the image. Of course, the bump map still uses the other UV layout with the bump image. So to create this effect, we use two different UV maps, one for the bump, for the Lego logo, and one for the color. And it was that simple. So now I'm just going to create a plane for the floor. We will just make it a kind of darker color with no specific details. Maybe a little bit of blue or something to make it look a little bit nice. We will go in and create, I think I'm going to render this with cycles, so I will create a plane for a lamp. And I'm going to get out of rendered mode for now and just go into solid. And we will make this a new material called lamp. It will be a type of emission. All right, we'll go and add a camera. Now this is one trick that I really like. If you have a camera selected and you press Shift tilde, you can fly, or sorry, you press with the camera selected, you press Control 0 and then Shift tilde, and then now you can fly with WASD and the mouse to kind of frame your shot. So I'm going to do like that. We will change our resolution to be something like that, maybe. I don't care if I crop it a little bit, so let's see how this looks. Cycles with GPU, please. And for the camera, for the viewport display, turn this up to black. Okay. And I'm going to rotate my camera a little bit. I think that looks good. And then for our, which one is this? Is this the floor? Yeah, we'll name this floor and this lamp 0 to go back into the camera view. And let's just bump up our lamp a little bit so we have some more of that kind of gloss on the Legos. So material, lamp, strength 5. How about that? Maybe more, 50. Probably too much. Let's do 20. Okay, so I like that. So you see some of those Legos really reflecting, making it look like it's plastic. And I think the Lego is probably a little bit too reflective. So let's go over here, a little bit more roughness. Okay, I like that. And I'm going to hit render, and we'll see what we get. All right, and the render is just about done here. And there we go. I am really happy with that. Now, the old render, you could see the colors were a lot more varied. There's a lot of different colors for the Lego bricks. Almost every Lego brick was actually a different color. But when you're doing a render, trying to simulate Legos, you don't have that many colors in real life. You have just a limited palette. And so what I decided to try this time was deliberately adjusting the texture to look more limited. So here we have American Gothic. And if I go into Photoshop, paste this in here, I'm going to blur it just a little bit, something like that. And then I'm going to go into adjustments, or no, mode, indexed color, flatten layers. And yeah, so if you say like, let's say 8, or I think 13 is the smallest, it limits your palette to be just 13 colors. So that would be like if you had 13 different colors of Lego, then if you use this as the texture in your final render, there'll only be 13 different colors of Lego bricks. So it'll be more convincing because it will look like it's only using, the same Lego bricks over and over again, whereas in my old render, I just use the colors from the image, so every brick has a unique color. This will look more like the original source material, whereas this will look more like it was deliberately made out of, a finite palette. Like when they make a mosaic out of Rubik's Cubes, you only have 6 colors to work with, so you have to be creative with how you use those colors. So by doing that in Photoshop to the texture ahead of time, it made it so that I could kind of mimic that effect. So here's the one that I used for a texture. Now I also have Starry Night, which I went ahead and already did. Now Starry Night has a slightly different aspect ratio, so it'll stretch, but we can play with that. So let's quickly switch it out to Starry Night and see what we can do. So what I'm going to do is just rotate it, and then actually, I'm just going to render it like this, but we will rotate this. All right, and then let's pick out Starry Night, and there we go. It's that simple now. All the Lego bricks are colored like Starry Night. I also have a Super Mario 64, so let's rotate that. Now this one I didn't do the filter on, so this has a bunch of different, colors, so we'll see what that looks like. And boom. So it's so awesome because the UV map is what is responsible, this second UV map called UV color, is what's responsible for coloring each brick. Each brick has its own UV map for the Lego bump, right? But then the color comes from a second UV map, and so you can just quickly switch images. We also have a Blender logo. Any image you want, you can just instantly color all of those Lego bricks, and it's just right there at your fingertips. I love it so much. So that'll do it for today's episode. I hope you learned something. I hope you learned something about how you can use multiple UV maps, and how if you make your UV map a single point, then you can change colors really quickly. And so I just basically made every Lego brick a single point. And in case you're wondering how I did that so quickly, I guess I'll show you that really quick. So let's, what's the best way to show you? I guess I'll just do it with a couple cubes. So let's hide Suzanne for now. Let's add a cube. Let's duplicate. couple times. Okay, so we have all those. I'm going to unwrap, project from view, and we will reuse the same material. All right. So we have the rainbow going across all the cubes. And as you can see, I have in the UV editor all the cubes so I can move them around. If I shrink them down, they can all switch colors at one time. But what we can do is if we go press period for scaling mode and say individual origins, what does that mean? Well, now each cube can scale individually. Before, it was median point, so they all scale around their center. But with individual origins, each cube will scale individually. So if I just hit scale 0, each one becomes a single point. And so now if we were to select them all, go back to median point, and then rotate them, something like that, each cube now gets a different color. Of course, I could select just this cube and then pick a color for that one and so forth. I could select this cube, move that over to whatever color I wanted. And so that's all we did with the Legos, is I modeled the Lego, I used the array modifier to duplicate a bunch of them, I unwrapped the Legos projected from view over a texture, and then I just shrunk them all down to a single point like we did here. And that's how it inherits the color from a picture. So that'll do it for today. I hope you understood everything. I hope to see some of these renders posted. If you make one, please share it with me. Of course, remember to like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. And I think in a future video coming very soon, I might do another Lego render, but this time with physics. So having Legos fall in from the sky or something like that. So look forward to that. But that's it for now.